Hello everyone, good day. I'm Sisira, your Azure Data Engineering Trainer. Coming to my introduction, I'm working as a data engineering lead in one of the leading MNCs. I have around 5 years of experience in Azure Data Engineering and 8 years of experience in teaching Python and data engineering. Okay, now, let's proceed with our class now. As a data engineer, it's necessary for us to understand the basics of data. So now let's first understand like what's data. So here, as you can see, data is a collection of raw facts. And here, for example, if you see Rama and 20, so Rama is a raw fact and 20 is a raw fact. So if you have this raw data, the interpretation may differ from person to person. Few persons may infer this as Ram's age is 20, and few persons may infer this as Ram's height may be 20 inches or like that. So here, if you give a raw data like Ram and 20, the way persons interpret, the interpretation differs from person to person. So here we can define the data as collection of raw facts. Ram is a fact and 20 is a fact. But here not you are not exactly telling the information that Ram's age is 20. So when you just give the raw facts, then the interpretation may differ from person to person. So this is not an ideal thing to give just the data. So that is the reason you will be processing the raw data, and then after processing the data, the one which you get is called as the information. So now here clearly you have written that Ram's age is 20 years. Now the interpretation is same for every individual. So even Sisira reads or some other one reads, here the information is same. Ram's age is 20 years. Okay, now we have known what is data and what is information. Now, what is big data? See, for example, if you take cooking rice. So, whenever you are cooking rice for your family members, you'll be using a small cooker for you. And for example, if some relatives join your house, then what you'll do, you'll use big whistles to cook them. So, what I want to interpret from this example is that if you want to deal with small amount of data, you'll be using some tools. But it is not, if you use the same tools for dealing with huge amount of data, that is big data, it doesn't work. So the tools which you are going to use for big data are different, and the tools which you are going to use to deal with the small amount of data are different. Okay. So it is also important for us to know what are the different kinds of data we are going to extract for our business. So when you get into the project, you'll be dealing with different kinds of data. Those are live data, historical data, analytical data, predictive data, and data for change. Coming to this live data, so when you're getting live data, you'll come to know what is currently happening there. For example, if you take cricket live updates, so you'll be watching the cricket live updates on the TV, and you'll get to know what is the current score, what is happening currently in the stadium. And also, if we take the example of ATM machines, what this ATM in this ATM machines, they'll be setting few alerts. So this is how banks will know whether a particular ATM is working or not. They'll be setting an alert for every 5 or 10 minutes and checking whether each ATM is working fine or not. So, when we are focusing on the current data, that is the live data, we'll come to know what is happening currently. So, if you are focusing on the current score, then you'll be currently knowing what is happening in the stadium. If you are focusing on this ATM alerts, you will know whether this particular ATM is working or not. So, now coming to this historical data, for example, you want to know who is the best cricketer. For this, what you'll do, you will collect the past data, that is historical data, and do the analysis to know who is the best cricketer. And then coming to this analytical data, what you'll do, you'll collect the data required for doing analysis. See, whenever you collect the data, you will be collecting different kinds of data. But analytical data is the data which you will take to do particular analysis. For example, you want to know why Sachin is unable to score century in a particular ground. For this, you will be collecting some analytical data that is related to Sachin. And now coming to predictive data. See, this predictive data, you will connect this data to predict something. For example, this COVID you can take. So if you want to predict how many cases are going to be in the next month, for this you will collect the data regarding the COVID patients count, and then you will get to a conclusion like how many patients are going to be in coming month. And this is the data for change. So this is a very important kind of data. For example, let's think that Samsung has released a phone in the market, and by seeing its sales, the sales seem to be less. So then what these guys will do is they'll do a survey on which, like, why is it not going fast into the market, and what are the features that are being expected from this product, how are users feeling, like what could be better, and those all things they'll do a survey and they'll collect. And after that, based on that survey, they'll change few futures based upon the data they got from the survey, and this is called as data for change. Okay, now we have known the types of data we are going to deal with, but what are the sources of data for these types of data? So these are the sources of data from which you are getting these all data. Coming to transactional data, so whenever you purchase anything, a transaction is made. If you go to an Amazon site, you purchase something, you will pay for it, and a transaction is made. And coming to the scientific data, this is mainly used by scientists. So if it is the data related to bacteria and species, and also DNA, like that. And the sensor data, this is the data which is getting generated from the sensors. So whenever you visit an office, then you will have a biometric. So this all comes under the sensor data. And the other one is our most favorite, the social media data. So whenever we put a post, whenever we message, whenever we create some videos, so everything is getting recorded. So this is how the social media data gets generated. And the other one is enterprise data. This is the data related to the enterprise, like inventory, sales, uh, and basically this enterprise data is like, if you want to store all the information related to your employees, then you'll be using this ERP tools. We have SAP, Salesforce, like that. And then public data, this is the data which is related to public, like census will be having they'll be doing the census for every 10 years or 5 years to know, like uh, what is the count of uh, number of individuals present per state, per place, like that. So that comes under this public data. Okay, now, so while collecting the data, we do not require the entire data for analysis. So what we are going to do, we are going to extract the only the required data from the entire data. Once we have extracted this required data, we'll start doing the analysis. So till now we have seen what are the different types of data and what are the different sources of data, and where is it, data getting generated from. So once the data gets generated, we need to extract. Once the data gets generated in the source system, what we need to do, we need to extract this data and perform some transformations on it, and then convert it into a required format and load the data into the target system. So now here comes the concept of ETL, where E stands for extract, T stands for transform, and L stands for load. Okay. Can someone tell me examples of few ETL tools?
Hi, Praveen this side. I have one question on the same. Shall I?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
as you mentioned, we first generate the data on, or we have to analyze the data onto the source system, then we start the
Yeah,
extraction, correct? So you don't
yeah.
think while analysis the data onto the source system, it will take some time, or it is time consuming, even the processing time. Instead of that, we can extract data from source system to our staging in our environment. Staging might be a storage account, so that cost will we can
Yes.
reduce there.
Yes,
Will this
Praveen, you
will
are
this
correct.
help?
That there comes the concept of ELT. We will cover it soon. See, that
Okay,
scenario is
okay,
different. Whenever, yeah, yeah. I'll be covering that
okay.
also. Now let's cover the CTL concept. And then, yeah, you have told the correct point. But yes, we'll cover that point also. For now, we'll be covering the CTL and then coming to your part. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So basically, we'll be using Azure Databricks for ETL, right? Is this correct?
ELT. See, yeah, let me cover that thing. See, whenever you are dealing with big data, you will go for ELT. Why ELT? I'll be covering that thing. Please give me some time because there'll be few freshers also, no? So let's go step by step. Okay? Hello? Yeah, okay. Now let's continue our session. Where are we? Okay, I have asked you few ETL tools. So there are many ETL tools like traditional ETL tools like Informatica, ODI, Data Stage, Talent, etc. We have around 20 plus ETL tools. So now let's cover the concept of ETL. So ETL, see, we'll be having different source systems. So here the source systems might be ERPs like SAP, Salesforce, and few CSV, JSON, and XML files coming from third-party vendors. And also there might be any source systems. So from these all source systems, what we will do, we will extract the data from the source systems and then put them in the staging area. So, on the data present in the staging area, we'll be doing some transformations using an ETL tool. Let's do this in Paint and let me tell you in detail.
One more thing. If we want to build ETL tool, right, we can also use Data Factory for the same.
Yes, yes, yes. I'll cover all those. Please give me some time.
Yeah.
So here our sources. So here under the sources we can have many. So all the ERPs like SAP, Salesforce, many JSON files, CSV files, mainframes, etc.
Oh,
So we can
Cicero,
have
you're typing
many.
something. Excuse me.
Yeah,
Hello.
I think
yeah,
you are
I'm
Naveen.
not
still
shared
like
your
I'm
screen.
able to say or yeah, we are seeing your
Okay, okay. I'm
presentation only,
sorry.
not
Yeah,
the
I think
paint.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, 1 minute. I'm sharing.
So Sirisha, just would like to check what are the tools we'll be learning during this process of data engineering.
So as part of this data engineering course, we'll be learning in depth about Azure Data Factory,
Okay.
Databricks, and also like the things which are necessary as a data engineer. Like you have to know about the storage accounts, um, different types of storages. I'll be sharing you the course content. You can go through it. So is it visible now,
Um,
the paint which I'm sharing, or you
yeah,
want
but
me
your
to
No,
screen is
reshare?
blinking. Your screen
Oh,
is
is it same
blinking.
for you also? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's blinking for me also. Okay, then I'll share you once again.
Sushila, are you covering Synapse Analytics as well, along with the course content, or only Data Factory and Databricks?
Yes, I'm covering Synapse also, but not in depth. See,
Okay.
everything what is required in real time essence. Uh, so mostly we will be concentrating on real time scenarios, and also uh, clearing interview is also our target. So yeah.
Good. We
Okay.
can you walk through the course content means just
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
that
I
would
will.
be good
Yeah.
if you walk through the course content and yeah, some background about your experience, and that should be really
yeah.
helpful because
I
some of
think you
us
have
we
not
have around
you have
10
joined
plus.
lately. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, might be I faced some issues in the meantime, right initially when I joining the call, so I
Yes,
joined
yes,
5 minutes
yes.
late. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now let's continue this class. I'll definitely address all these questions at the last. Okay. So coming to this ETL. Now is it visible? The page which I'm sharing.
Yeah, it's visible now.
Yeah. So these are the sources. The sources can be anything. Mainly the ERPs and the JSON files, CSVs, etc. So once you get the data from the sources, you will extract the data from the sources using ETL tool, and then you will put all the data in the staging area. So whenever you put the data in the staging area, you will do in the staging area what you will do using this ETL tool. You will perform data validations, data cleansing, and all the required transformations. You will perform all the transformations on the data present in the staging area and convert it into a required format, and then store it into the target. And here in ETL, our target would be a data warehouse. So this is an ETL, and here our target would be the data warehouse. So this is the entire flow. From the sources, you will extract the all the data using an ETL tool and put it in the staging area. So when you put the data in the staging area, here in the staging area, you will be doing the data validations, data cleansing, and data transformations, and convert the data into the required format, and then store the data into the data warehouse. And now, so are you able to see this Word document which I'm sharing now?
yes.
Yeah. So the one more thing, the main thing which concept which we have to concentrate here is in ETL we'll be having different systems. So here the source systems are different, the staging area system is different, and the target system is different. So in ETL we'll be having three different systems. So here, so, okay, you have extracted the data from the source, kept it in the staging area, did some validations, cleansing, transformations, everything, and you have stored the data in the data warehouse. So, once you have stored the data in the data warehouse, all the users need not be the technical users. So, some business users do not know. So, if you ask those non technical users to write an SQL query and check on the data, they will be not able to do so. So that is the reason for these kind of non-technical guys, we will be having this visualization tools. Those are reporting tools. So here we'll be having reporting. So for reporting, uh, we can use Tableau, are the most Power BI, the most one. So here, so what is the main purpose of this reporting is that so all the users who are going to use the data who are going to use data from the data warehouse need not be the technical users. So that is the reason we will be having few reporting tools from where all the data will be represented, all the insights obtained from the data will be represented in visual format. So whenever the insights are in visual format, any user can understand it. So either a technical user, he will be able to understand it, and non-technical user also will be able to understand the insights gained from the data. So the main takeaways from this is in ETL there are three different systems. So source system is different, the staging system is different, and the data warehouse, the target system will be different. And yeah, and here the types of data. As all we know, we'll be having the three kinds of data. Those are structured data, unstructured data, and semi-structured data. So this coming to the structured data. So for the examples of the structured data, most of the databases which you see like SQL Server, Teradata, all the store the information in the form of tables. So whenever the data is in tabular format, you will consider it to be a structured data since it will be having a schema and all those. One second. Yeah. And coming to the semi-structured data. So semi-structured data, here you can see the data is present in the form of tags and all those. So the best example for the semi-structured data are JSON and XML. And unstructured data. So nowadays, previously what organizations used to do, they only need to they used to concentrate only on the structured data. But nowadays, why this big data and all has come is nowadays organizations are concentrating on this unstructured data also. They are also trying to get insights on the unstructured data. I mean, by collecting the unstructured data also. So the unstructured data includes the text form, the files which are in text format, audios, videos, etc. So this is also one main point. What is it? 99% of ETL tools support the processing of only the structured data, and few of them support the semi-structured data. This is the main thing. The traditional ETL tools do not support the processing of unstructured data. So that is where the concept of when these organizations have taken decision to also collect the unstructured data and process them, that is where the concept of this modern data warehousing have come into the picture. So this modern data warehouses will allow us to store the structured data, semi-structured data, and unstructured data also. Whereas the traditional data warehouses would not allow us to store the unstructured data. So some examples of this modern data warehouses are Snowflake, Azure Synapse, Amazon Redshift. So as part of this data engineering, Azure Data Engineering will be covering this Azure Synapse. So few of you have asked like why again the staging area and all those, no? So here comes the concept of ELT. One second. Yeah. So whenever you're going to deal with the big data, you'll go with ETL. Sorry, whenever you're going to deal with the big data, you will go with ELT. That is extract, load, transform, rather than ETL, because the big data you will be dealing with will have huge volumes of data. So the main point I have told you, what is it? In ETL, we will be having three systems, that is source system, staging system, and the target system. These are three different systems. But when you're dealing with huge amount of data, moving data from one system to another, moving data from one system to another system will be difficult for us. So that is the reason when we are dealing with the huge amount of data, that is big data, we will be going with ELT than ETL, because in ELT we will be having only two systems. See, one is the source system and the other one is data lake. Okay. Okay. So in ELT approach, we will be having staging and target in the single system. Here you can see the stage and the target is in single system. The target system is the data lake. So here in the data lake itself, you will be having the staging layer, staging as a different layer, and the target as a different layer. Since the staging and target are present in the same system, I have told you the staging and the final layer, both of this are present in the data lake itself. Since both of
So
these are present in the,
one question,
yeah,
Sisira, one question. So
yes,
Azure
yes.
Data Lake is nothing but Azure Synapse Analytics. Both are same.
Synapse is different,
Okay. I mean,
and yeah,
we are discussing like
this is
modern data
modern. Yes,
warehouses.
yes.
Yeah, like Synapse
Modern
Analytics. You
data
are saying.
warehouses are different. Yes, this is
Yeah.
I'm referring
Now,
here.
okay.
Yeah, you can proceed.
Yeah, my question is, generally we load data into the target. The target is nothing but data warehouse. Now you are saying it as Azure Data Lake, and in the previous screen you said like Azure Synapse is a modern data warehouse. So Synapse is nothing
Yes.
but data lake, right? In that case.
No, no, no. See, here in ETL, our
Okay.
target systems are data warehouse. Okay. So data
Okay.
warehouse is different and a data lake is different. So the difference between database, data warehouse, and data lake, we'll cover it. Okay. Then you'll get a
Okay.
clarity what is what. So
Okay.
here in ETL concept, the target system is data warehouse. In ELT, we are maintaining the target in data lake. So why data lake and what is data lake, everything we'll cover. You'll get a good clarity. We'll articulate each thing differently. I mean the difference clearly here. First, let me cover this concept. Okay.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. So where we have start. Yeah. Here the target system is the data lake. In this one system only, we are having both the staging layer and the target layer. Okay. So once what we will do here, we will extract all the data from the sources and put it in the staging staging folder. So in the data lake, we will differentiate the staging and final layer in the form of folders. So staging we'll be maintaining one folder, and for the final layer we'll be maintaining one folder. Okay. So once we extract all the data from the sources, we will put it in the staging folder, all the data in the staging folder, and we will perform some transformations and then move the data into the target folder. So if we observe here, the movement of data is within the data lake itself. Staging is present in the data lake, and the final target is present in the data lake. So what the thing you need to consider is when the data is movement when the movement of data is within the system. Here the data movement is within the system. I mean within the data lake itself. So whereas in the ETL concept, here this will be the different system, and the staging will be in the different system, and the target is in different system. But in ELT, the staging and final layer both are in the same system. So the movement will be fast. The external IO will not be present. So the data movement is within the same system. So this is how when you are dealing with the large amount of data, it will be fast. ELT will be fast because the movement is within the same system. So that is the reason you will be using the concept of ELT when you are dealing with big data. So the concept of ELT will be fast, but only in the case of big data. So here, precisely the diagram I have given. What is it? See here, from the source systems, you will extract the data, and you will put the data in the staging folder, not directly into the target tables. First, you will put the data into the staging folders, and then after processing the data, you will put the data into the target tables. And from this target tables, the users take the data and do their analysis, and also you will be building reports based on this target tables. Now all your doubts, the main thing, will be covered here: the difference between database, data warehouse, and data lake. See, so what is a database? So in layman terms, what is a database? A database is a system which holds the data. Majorly, this database will deal with the transactional data. So, what is transactional data? As we have already covered, when you go to a shop, you will buy something and you will pay for it. So, when you pay for it, a transaction gets created. So, basically, these databases are kind of OLTP, that is online transaction processing. So, and also these databases mainly store the structured data. And also the one more, see, it is an organized data. It stores the structured data. In this, yeah. So database is a, it is collection of data. It mainly deals with the structured data. So, and also this database is OLTP. Yeah, they store the structured data. And one more thing is, this database only holds the recent data. That is the day-to-day data. It only holds the recent data. So when coming to this database, it cannot hold the uh, historical data, like past 10 years data. If you want to hold the past 10 years data, you will go for data warehouse, not a database. Why is it so? We will be covering when we are learning about the data warehouse concept. Okay, so it will hold only the most recent data for the better performance. So if it holds, so if you are maintaining only 10 days of data in the database, and if you give a query, the performance will be high. If you are maintaining like 1 year of data in the database, and if you run a query against that data, it will take lot of time. So that is the reason, based upon the business, they will decide like how much data to be kept in the database. For example, if you consider a bank, so our bank, they'll maintain last 3 months of data. So based upon the business, it might differ, like how much days of data they want to maintain. They will be deciding based upon the type of business. Okay, and one more thing is, database will perform schema on write. So what is the schema on write? So what is this concept of schema on write? That means, for example, basically when you create a table in the database, you will write, you will use this create statement, create table EMP, and so here. So whenever you want to store the data in the database, what you will do? Firstly, you will create a table which will hold the data. So once you create a table, and now what you'll do? You'll insert the data, insert into EMP, and you will give values. So what is this concept of schema on write? What is it is, so whenever you are inserting the data into the table, it will validate, the database management system will validate whether this data is matching the I mean matching the schema or not. So whenever you are writing the data into the table, it will perform validations on the data whether the EMP ID which we are entering matches its data type. Is it int or not? So whenever you are entering the name, it will check whether uh, the data we are entering under the EMP name is kind of varchar or not. So here salary, it ensures that salary is int. So all these validations are being performed whenever we are writing the data into the table. That is the concept of schema on write. Schema on write is you are validating the data while writing the data into the database. So that is the meaning of schema on write. Valid schema on write means validating the data when you are writing the data into the database. This is the concept of schema right. So if and only if it passes the validation. So since now based upon the data here, so it passes the validation. Only if it passes the validation, the data gets entered into the table. So if it fails the validation, it will throw you an error that there is a mismatch, please check the data you have entered. And one more thing is, when you are using this database, it is costly. The cost to store the data in the database is high. So that is the reason you do not put the large amount of data in your database, because it is very costly and also it would be inefficient also. So whenever you use the database, it is costly and also it is inefficient to store large amount of data. So why is it the database is inefficient is because it is costly. It is costly if you store lot of information in it, I mean lot of data in the database, then you need to pay large amount of money. And also the one more thing is, so if you run a query, it will take a lot of time and it hits the performance of your database. So now you can get the doubt like okay, where are we now? Okay, we have covered the concept of database. So main things to remember regarding the databases: database will store only the structured data. It is an OLTP, that is online transaction processing. It will only be holding the recent data, and it is schema on write. That is, it will be validated. The validations are done on the data when you are writing the data into the database, and also the database is costly. So that is the reason if you put a huge amount of data in the database, you need to pay a large amount of money to it, and it will become inefficient. So now the concept of data warehouse. So ideally, this data warehouse will hold large amount of data when compared to database. It is mainly used for analytical processing. Okay, it will have more data than a database, and data warehouse is mainly used for analytics. So analytics processing, where we require lot of historical data. So whenever you want to perform some analytics, you will be requiring huge amount of data. I mean, you will be collecting some historical data. So whenever you want to perform analytics on the historical data, you will be using data warehouse, as the data warehouse contains the historical data. So now we can get a doubt that why can't I do analytics on the database itself? Cicera, you have told me that database will also contain the information. Then why are you coming to this data warehouse? So if you want to do so, like if you want to store entire information in the database, the first challenge you will face is that you should maintain a lot of data, which is a costly affair. I have covered this point here itself when covering about the database. So since the database is costly, you will end up paying huge amount of data. Sorry, you will end up paying huge amount of cost. So, and also the moment when you run the complex queries on the database with an intent to do some analysis, the database will become slow. That means, so whenever you run a query on the database, what will happen? It will become slow because you will be having the huge amount of data. That is the reason you won't be maintaining huge amount of data in the database, and all the historical data, what you'll do, all the historical data from the database, you'll be sending it to the data warehouse. So, um, since I have told you that database is a costly affair, and if you maintain the huge amount of the data in the database, it will impact the performance of the server. So, what we don't really want to complicate the things and burden over the database with a lot of analytical queries. So, that is why what we'll think is okay, no worries. Only the present data which we will be using, let's maintain that data in the database, and all the historical data, let's move it into the data warehouse. And from this data warehouse only, you will be doing the analysis on the historical data. So that is the main reason, like why you migrate the data from the database to data warehouses. Database is costly, and also if you maintain huge amount of data in the database, if you run a few analytical queries on this database, it hits the performance of the database. Okay. So database is meant for only storing the day-to-day transactions, and data warehouse is meant for storing the historical data. Okay. And what are the okay, I have told you that the sources for this database can be any source system. But what is the sources of this data warehouse? The sources of this data warehouse are the different kinds of databases. Databases. So here, what what the data warehouse is, what the data warehouse stores is, it will store the information from the different databases. All the historical data from the different databases get stored in data warehouse. And it also, and one more thing is, in data warehouse you can only store the structured data. So few examples of this data warehouse are Teradata, Oracle, and all this comes under this data warehouse. So when compare in terms of cost, data warehouse is less costlier when compared to database. So as I have told you, whenever you have your data warehouse as a target, see here, whenever the data warehouse is a target, then you will use the concept of ETL. Since the data warehouse only use the structured data, and structured data, most of the times the structured data won't be a big data. I mean, you won't get large amount of data. And now, okay. So here, so in this ETL, a transform. when you perform transformations, these transformations which you do, transformation is a complex process, and also it is a time consuming activity. And sometimes while loading the data, we might not be aware of what type of transformations we are going to apply. See, here in ETL concept, what are we doing? We are getting the data from the sources. We are performing transformations directly. But in some scenarios, what we will be having is we will collect the data from sources, and we don't know what transformations to be performed here, because so we will extract the data, but we don't know what transformations to be performed here. So whenever you don't know the transformations to be performed, what you can do, you can directly store the data in the staging without performing the transformations. So there will be sometimes we will while loading the data, we might not be able to get. I mean, we might not be able to decide on transformations what we are going to apply. That is, we are unclear of how are we going to use that data later. So here ETL, when you perform ETL, before itself you need to perform the transformations. When you are using ETL, you will extract, and before loading the data to the data warehouse itself, you will be performing the transformations. But there are few scenarios where in which you don't know what transformations to be performed, because you don't know how the data will be used by the end users. So that in such cases, the concept of ELT will be useful. So what you'll do is, in that cases, what you'll do is you'll extract the data from the sources, and you'll dump the raw data itself to the data lake. You won't perform any transactions before the here itself. What you'll do, you'll directly take the raw data and dump the data in the data lake. And whenever you want that data, what you will do, you will take the data, you'll then perform the transformations and then use the data. So to be, I mean, to get more understanding, now let's see the concept of data lake. Here you will get nice understanding like why ELT and ETL. So in this data lake, just like data warehouse, data lake is also meant to get some insights from the data. So why are we using this data warehouse? Using the data warehouse, you will check the data, historical data, you will do some analysis, and you will get some insights. Data lake is also used for the same purpose. You will just use this data lake to analyze and get some data. Data lake is also used to analyze the data and get some insights from the data. Then why? Okay, you told me that data warehouse also, you'll be storing the historical data, you'll do some analytics and get some insights. You also told me that data lake is also same. We are going to analyze the data and get the insights from the data. Then what is the purpose of going for data lake after having data warehouse? So in the data lake, we can store the data in the raw format. Whereas in the data warehouse, you cannot store the data in the raw format. Only the processed data can be stored in the data warehouse. Here, you can store only the processed data. But in the data lake, you can store the raw data also. So that is the first difference. What is the difference? In the data warehouse, you need to only store the process data. It allows you to store the process data. But in the data lake, it will give you a flexibility to store the raw data. And the other difference is that here I have told you the data warehouse will store the structured data. But whereas in the data lake, you can store the structured, semi-structured, unstructured data also. So this is the second difference. In the data warehouse, you will be storing only the structured data. Data lake allows you to store the structured data, unstructured data, and semi-structured data. So for example, let's consider we are having a log file. to store the log file in the data warehouse. So if you're having a log file and if you want to store the log file in the data warehouse, what you need to do? So before storing that log file into the data warehouse, you need to process that log file. But whereas in the data lake, what you will do, you just extract that log file and you will directly dump it into the data lake. So when we want to put that log file into a data warehouse, we have to extract it, you have to transform it into a structured form. So if you see a log file, it will usually be a text file. So if it's a text file, it will come under an unstructured data. So you have to process this unstructured data and then you need to change it into a structured form and then load the data into the data warehouse. This is in the case of, I mean, if you want to store that log file in the data warehouse. But in the case of data lake, we can directly store the file in the raw format in our data lake. Directly you can extract the log file and put it into the data lake. That means it follows the ELT process. First we are extracting the log file and directly loading that log file into the data lake. Then if someone then after 10 days if they want to see those log file, what will they do? They will perform the transformations on the log file and then they will process it and convert into the required format and then they use it. So I have told you in data lake we will follow the process. If the target is data lake, then we will go for ELT. So if our target is a data warehouse, you will go for ETL. Why ETL? Because data warehouse can store only the structured format. So if you want the data to be in the structured format, you should perform the transformations before itself while loading into the data warehouse. So when you are using data lake as your target, you need not perform the transformations. You can directly put the raw data into the data lake. That is the reason you will extract the data, you will load the data into the data lake. So now, we are taking this log file as an example, no? So in case of ELT, we will extract the log file, load it into the data lake, and later think of transformation. First, we are extracting the log file, putting it into the data lake, and later thinking about the transformations, like what are the transformations to be performed on it. So whenever we want to use, when and only you want to use that log file, then you are performing the transformation. So this is the concept of ELT. First, you will get the raw data, you will dump in the data lake. Only if and only you want to use it, then you will perform the transformations. You cleanse the data and then you will use it. That means you are thinking about the transformation later, after storing, after loading, you are thinking about transformations. In the concept of ETL, first we will do transformation and then you will load the data. In concept of ELT, first you will load the data. That is, you will dump the data into the data lake and then think about transformations to be performed on that data. So for example of data lake, coming to the example of data lake, HDFS can be the example. See, HDFS stands for Hadoop Distributed File System. So in this HDFS, we can store the data in the raw format. Since the HDFS is a data lake, we can store the data in the raw format. And later when we want to use the data, see, for example, since we are considering this log file an example, what you will do is in HDFS, first you will store the log file in the HDFS. So you will store first the extract. You will extract the log file and store the log file in HDFS. So once you store, okay, the loading is done. Now after 10 days, I want to use this log file. Then what will I do? Then I will create Hive tables on top of it. If you are considering this log file an example, first you will extract the log file from the system and put it into the data lake. After putting the log file into the HDFS, whenever I want to use this log file, that is I want this after 10 days I have come back and I want to use this log file, then what will I do? I will create a hive table on top of this log file and perform the transformation.
Or it just
Perform the
can you repeat
transformation.
once the like while we starting the hive table, why we will create hive table? I didn't get
Yeah, one second, I'll tell you.
only this point. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. See, I have told you ETL and ELT. So whenever you want to store the data in the data warehouse, you will store only the processed data. That is, processed data means you are performing the transformations on the data and cleansing the data, converting into the structured format, and then storing the data. Because data warehouse is able to store only the structured data. So when coming to data lake can store the data in the raw format itself. So when you are able to store the data in raw format itself, why again you need to perform the transformations before storing the data? And also, you don't understand, like, uh, is everyone comfortable with Telugu?
I'm okay with that. Not okay.
Yes, yes, okay.
Yeah. అయితే ఇక్కడ ఏంటంటే మనకి ఇప్పుడు డేటా వేర్ హౌస్లో స్టోర్ చేసుకునేటప్పుడు ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ అనేది స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ ఫార్మాట్లో ఉండాలి. ఒక టేబుల్లో నువ్వు డేటా ఇన్సర్ట్ చేయాలి అని అనుకుంటే అదొక స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ ఫార్మాట్లో ఉండాలి, దానికి ఒక స్కీమా అనేది ఉండాలి, అది ఈ డేటా టైప్తో అయి ఉండాలి, అలా ఉండాలి. ఎందుకు? డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ అనేది ఇట్ ఓన్లీ కెన్ ఏబుల్ టు స్టోర్ ది స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ ఫార్మాట్. వెన్ కమింగ్ టు డేటా లేక్లో నువ్వు ఎలాంటి టైప్ ఆఫ్ డేటానైనా స్టోర్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. స్ట్రక్చర్ డేటా అయినా స్టోర్ చేసుకోవచ్చు, సెమీ స్ట్రక్చర్ డేటా అయినా స్టోర్ చేసుకోవచ్చు, అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటానైనా స్టోర్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. అయితే ఇప్పుడు మీరు అడిగిన డౌట్‌లో ఏందంటే హైవ్ టేబుల్ ఎప్పుడు ఇక్కడ ఎందుకు క్రియేట్ చేస్తున్నా అని. అయితే నాకేందంటే నాకు లాగ్ ఫైల్ అనేది వస్తుంది, కానీ నాకు తెలియదు నేనేం చేస్తా, ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్తో ఏం చేయాలో నాకు తెలియదు, నేను ఎందుకు వాడతానో తెలీదు, అది నేనే వాడతానో తెలీదు, లేకపోతే ఎవరో వచ్చి ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ని వాడతారో, దాన్ని ఎందుకు వాడతారో కూడా నాకు తెలీదు. కాకపోతే నాకు ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ అయితే కావాలి, ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ కావాలి, ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ నుంచి నేను కొన్ని ఇన్సైట్స్ తెచ్చుకుందాం అనుకుంటున్నా అనేది ఒక్కటే నాకు తెలుసు. ఎవరో ఒకరు మా టీంలో ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ని వాడతారు అనే విషయం ఒక్కటే నాకు తెలుసు. కానీ ఎందుకు వాడతారు, దేనికి వాడతారు, ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ డేటాని ఎలా కన్వర్ట్ చేయాలనుకుంటున్నారు వాళ్ళు, అదంతా నాకు తెలియదు. ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ ఒక్కటే నాకు కావాలి, అది మాత్రం కావాలి, దాంట్లో కొంచెం ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ ఉంది అని ఒక్కటే నాకు తెలుసు. అది ఏ ఫార్మాట్లో వాళ్ళు కావాలనుకుంటున్నారు, దేనికి అది యూజ్ చేయాలనుకుంటున్నారు, అదంతా నాకు తెలియదు. ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ ఒక్కటి కావాలి. సో ఇలాంటి సినారియోస్లో ఎప్పుడైతే నీకు ఒకటి కావాలి అని తెలుసు, కానీ అది ఎందుకు కావాలి అనేది నీకు తెలీదు, అలాంటి టైంలో నువ్వేం చేస్తావంటే ఆ రా డేటాని మొత్తం తీసుకొచ్చి డేటా లేక్లో డంప్ చేసేస్తావు. సో ఇప్పుడు ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ అనేది కావాలి అని తెలుసు నాకు, కానీ ఎందుకు కావాలి, దేనికి వాడాలనుకుంటున్నారు అనేది నాకు తెలియదు. సో అలాంటి టైంలో నేను ఏం చేస్తున్నాను, ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ని తీసుకొచ్చేసి డేటా లేక్లో డంప్ చేసేస్తున్నాను. ఎందుకంటే దాని మీద ఏ ట్రాన్స్ఫర్మేషన్స్ పర్ఫామ్ చేయాలో నాకు తెలీదు, ఎందుకు వాడుతున్నారో నాకు తెలీదు, ఎవరు వాడతారో కూడా నాకు తెలీదు, కాకపోతే ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ అయితే నాకు కావాలి. సో దట్ ఈస్ ద రీజన్ నేను ఏం చేస్తున్నా, ఐఎమ్ బ్రింగింగ్ దట్ లాగ్ ఫైల్ అండ్ పుట్టింగ్ ఇట్ టు ద డేటా లేక్. ఇప్పుడు 10 డేస్ తర్వాత మా టీమ్మేట్ ఒకడు వచ్చాడు, వాడు చెప్తాడు నాకు ఈ లాగ్ ఫైల్ కావాలి, ఎవరో ఒకరు ఏదో చేశారు, సో ఈ లాగ్ ఫైల్లో అది ఉంటుంటుంది అన్నప్పుడు వాడేం చేస్తాడంటే వాడు ఒక హైవ్ టేబుల్ అనేది క్రియేట్ చేస్తాడు దీని మీద. ఇది హెచ్డిఎఫ్ఎస్ కాబట్టి దీని మీద ఒక హైవ్ టేబుల్ అనేది క్రియేట్ చేస్తాడు. క్రియేట్ చేసి దాని మీద వాడు అనాలిసిస్ అనేది పర్ఫామ్ చేసుకుంటాడు. ఎందుకంటే వాడికి తెలుసు ఇప్పుడు కాల్ వచ్చింది, వాడికి అవసరం వచ్చింది ఏంటి, ఎవడో ఒకడు ఏదో ఒకటి చేశాడు, ఆ ఏదో ఒకటి అనేది ఈ లాగ్ ఫైల్లో ఉంది, వాడు ఏం చేశాడు అనేది. సో అందుకనే ఈ టీమ్మేట్ అనే అబ్బాయి ఆ లాగ్ ఫైల్ని తీసుకొని దీని మీద ఒక హైవ్ టేబుల్ క్రియేట్ చేసి దాన్ని చూసుకుంటాడు, దాన్ని అనలైజ్ చేస్తాడు. డి యూ గెట్ ఇట్?
నాకు అర్థం. Yeah, I got it. Thanks for that.
ఓకే.
But this can be done using a ETL also, right, Sisra?
సి
So
మీకు
if
అదే
we have
చెప్తున్నానండి.
log file, mm,
ఈటీఎల్ కాన్సెప్ట్లో ఏమవుతుందంటే, ఈటీఎల్ కాన్సెప్ట్లో ఏంటి, ఇక్కడ మీరు డేటాని ఎక్స్ట్రాక్ట్ చేయంగానే ట్రాన్స్ఫర్మేషన్స్ చేసేయాలి. ఎందుకంటే డేటా వేర్‌హౌస్ ఓన్లీ స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ ఫార్మాట్ డేటాని స్టోర్ చేయాలనుకుంటుంది కదా! సో డేటాని మీరు ముందే
మనం
క్లెన్స్ చేసేయాలి.
staging లో మనము if we want to get the raw data also we can get it in the staging area. So actually data warehouse లో మనము డేటాని స్ట్రక్చర్ ఫార్మాట్ లో పెడుతున్నాం. వాట్ ఈస్ ద అండర్లయింగ్ టెక్నాలజీ అన్న ఇన్ డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ ఎక్కడ స్టోర్ అయి ఉంటది?
ఇప్పుడు డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ అనేది దానికి టూల్స్ ఉంటాయి. ఒరాకిల్ అనేది, టెరాడేటా అనేది, ఇవన్నీ టూల్స్ విచ్ ఆర్ స్టోరింగ్ యువర్ డేటా ఇన్ స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ ఫార్మాట్.
It's like a table format only, right?
అవును. ఎస్.
సో
సో
అది
టేబుల్
డేటాబేస్.
ఫార్మాట్ లో ఇప్పుడు ఒక హలో.
సో మనము ఆ టేబుల్ ఫార్మాట్ లో స్టోర్ చేస్తున్నామంటే ఇట్స్ అండర్లయింగ్ అనే డేటాబేస్ ఓన్లీ, రైట్?
ఎస్, దట్ ఈస్ వాట్ ఐఎమ్ టెల్లింగ్. మరి ఇప్పుడు డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ లో ఉన్న ఎక్స్ట్రా డేటా మొత్తం తీసుకొచ్చే డేటాబేస్ లో ఉన్న హిస్టారికల్ డేటాని మొత్తం తీసుకొచ్చే డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ లో పెట్టుకుంటాం కదా.
సో అప్పుడు మనము ఇఫ్ యూ వాంట్ టు పర్ఫార్మ్ అనలిటిక్ ఫర్ అనాలిసిస్ కోసం యూజ్ చేసుకున్నాం అనుకోండి, డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ యు ఆర్ సేయింగ్ దట్ డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ హ్యావింగ్ ఏ హిస్టారికల్ డేటా అండ్ ఎవ్రీథింగ్.
అవును.
So if you want any perform some analytical on top of that, so as you said, the data warehouse is a slow when you are extracting data, or if you want to perform any as it contains
డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ స్లో
historical.
అని ఎక్కడ చెప్పానండి? డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ స్లో అని చెప్పలేదు, లెస్ కాస్ట్లీ అని చెప్పా వెన్ కంపేర్ టు డేటాబేస్.
So when we want to extract data from that data warehouse, it performs it have a good performance.
ఎస్, అదే కదండి. ఇప్పుడు డేటాబేస్, డేటా వేర్ హౌస్ అనేవి రెండు ఎందుకు సపరేట్గా మెయింటైన్ చేస్తున్నారంటే, ఇప్పుడు మనం ఒక అమెజాన్ డేటాబేస్ ఉంది. అమెజాన్ డేటాబేస్లో మీరు పర్చేసింగ్ చేయడానికి ఒకే డేటా, వాళ్ళు ఒక డేటాబేస్లోనే అంతా మెయింటైన్ చేస్తున్నారు అనుకోండి. మీరు పర్చేస్ చేసేది, మీరు సెర్చ్ చేస్తున్నప్పుడు కూడా అదే డేటాబేస్ నుంచి ఇన్ఫర్మేషన్ ని ఫెచ్ చేస్తుంటది. అదే అమెజాన్ వాళ్ళు ఉంటారు కదా, అమెజాన్ వాళ్ళే క్వెరీస్ రన్ చేస్తున్నారు అనుకో, ఆ క్వెరీస్ కూడా ఇదే డేటాబేస్ మీద రన్ చేస్తే వాళ్ళ క్వెరీస్ ఒకే డేటాబేస్ మీద, మీ క్వెరీస్ ఒకే డేటాబేస్ మీద, సో అందరి క్వెరీస్ ఒకే డేటాబేస్ మీద పనిచేస్తుంటే ఏమవుతుంది, క్వెరీస్ ఎక్కువ అయిపోతుంది. సో అప్పుడు ఏమవుతుంది, చాలా మంది ఒకే దాన్ని వాడుతుంటే ఏమవుతుంది, మీ సిస్టమ్ పర్ఫార్మెన్స్ అనేది హిట్ అవుతుంది. సో ఈ పర్ఫార్మెన్స్ని ఇంక్రీజ్ చేయడానికి కోసమే ఎక్కడ చూసినా కూడా మీకు 2 సిస్టమ్స్గా డివైడ్ అయి ఉంటుంది. ఓఎల్టీపీ అనేది, ఓఎల్ఏపీ అనేది. ఓఎల్టీపీ అంటే ఏంటంటే ఓన్లీ యూజర్స్ కోసం, ఎండ్ యూజర్స్ మాత్రమే దాన్ని యూజ్ చేస్తుంటారు. అమెజాన్ వాళ్ళకి ఓఎల్టీపీ డిఫరెంట్ ఉంటుంది. ఆ ఓఎల్టీపీ నుంచి డేటా ఎవరు యూజ్ చేస్తారు అంటే మనం యూజ్ చేస్తాం, యూజర్స్ హూ ఆర్ యూజింగ్ అమెజాన్. మనం వాడే అమెజాన్ కి డేటా ఎక్కడి నుంచి వస్తుంది, ఓఎల్టీపీ. మనం చేసే ట్రాన్సాక్షన్స్ అన్ని ఓఎల్టీపీలో స్టోర్ అవుతుంది. అదే అమెజాన్ బిజినెస్ పర్సన్స్ వాళ్ళందరూ చేసే అనాలిసిస్, ఆ క్వరీస్ అన్ని ఓఎల్ఏపీ మీద పర్ఫామ్ చేస్తారు వాళ్ళు. సో మీరు వాడే డేటాబేస్ డిఫరెంట్, వాళ్ళు వాడే డేటాబేస్ డిఫరెంట్. సో ఇక్కడనే కొంచెం మీకు ఏమవుతుంది, వాళ్ళు క్వరీస్ వేరే దాని మీద పర్ఫామ్ చేస్తున్నారు, మీ క్వరీస్ వేరే దాని మీద పర్ఫామ్ అవుతున్నాయి. సో మీకు వేరేది, వాళ్ళకి వేరేది. మీకు ఓఎల్టీపీ, వాళ్ళకు ఓఎల్ఏపీ. సో ఓఎల్ఏపీ అనేది డేటా వేర్ హౌస్. ఓఎల్ఏపీలో మీరు చాలా అమౌంట్ ఆఫ్ డేటాని స్టోర్ చేసుకుంటారు, దట్ ఈస్ హిస్టారికల్ డేటాని అంతా స్టోర్ చేసుకుంటారు. అండ్ యూ విల్ బి పర్ఫార్మింగ్ అనాలిసిస్ ఆన్ దట్ హిస్టారికల్ డేటా అండ్ గెట్టింగ్ ఇన్సైట్స్. వెరాజ్ ఓఎల్టీపీ ఇప్పుడు కరెంట్గా వాడేది, ఇప్పుడు బ్యాంక్స్ యూజ్ చేసేది కూడా ఓఎల్టీపీ. హలో.
ఎస్.
యా. అండ్ వన్ మోర్ థింగ్, ఇప్పుడు ఇది ఒకటి మీకు క్లారిటీ వస్తే డేటా లేక్ గురించి, ఇప్పుడైతే ఒకటి వచ్చింది కదండి క్లారిటీ. రా డేటాని మీరు దీంట్లో స్టోర్ చేసుకోలేరు డేటా వేర్ హౌస్లో. ఎందుకంటే రా డేటా మీ సమ్ టైమ్స్ బి అన్ అన్స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటా. ఈ అన్స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటాని యూ కాన్ టేక్ అండ్ పుట్ ఇట్ ఇన్ ద డేటా వేర్ హౌస్. whereas in the data lake you have an option of storing the raw data directly. సో మీరు అన్నట్టు ఒకవేళ రా డేటా అనేది స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటా అయితే అప్పుడు మీరు స్టోర్ చేసుకోవచ్చు. కానీ ఇక్కడ ఏంటి, ఒకవేళ రా డేటా కెన్ ఆల్సో బి అన్ అన్స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటా. So if the data is unstructured, you can't directly store that unstructured data into the data warehouse. You need to convert this unstructured data into the structured data and then store that structured data into the data warehouse. So one more thing
నేను
ఏంటంటే,
స్టేజింగ్ ఏరియా వరకే ఓకే.
చెప్పండి.
నేను స్టేజింగ్ ఏరియా వరకే మాట్లాడుతున్నాను. నేను డేటా వేర్ హౌస్‌కి వెళ్ళట్లేదు ఇంకా. ఓన్లీ ఐ యామ్ టాకింగ్ అబౌట్ ద స్టేజింగ్ ఏరియా. క్యాన్ వి గెట్ అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటా ఇంటూ స్టేజింగ్ ఏరియా ఇన్ ETL ప్రాసెస్ రైట్?
దానికోసము ఇప్పుడు ట్రెడిషనల్ ఈటీఎల్ టూల్స్ అనేవి అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటాతో పనిచేయవండి.
హుహు.
ఇప్పుడు ఆ స్టేజింగ్ ఏరియా అవన్నీ, అందుకే మోడర్న్ డేటా వేర్ హౌసెస్ అనేవి. ఇప్పుడు మీకు స్టేజింగ్ ఏరియా కూడా, ఇప్పుడు ఎస్క్యూఎల్లో మీరు మైఎస్క్యూఎల్లో మీరు అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటాని స్టోర్ చేసుకోగలుగుతారా?
హ్మ్.
హలో,
ఆ!
మైఎస్క్యూఎల్లో మీరు అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటాని స్టోర్ చేసుకోగలుగుతారా?
ఐ కెన్.
మైఎస్క్యూఎల్లో స్టోర్ చేసుకోగలుగుతారా?
చేయలేము.
మైఎస్‌క్యూఎల్ లేదు.
అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటాని.
అవ్వదు.
అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్ మైఎస్‌క్యూఎల్‌లో కాదు.
అదే అండి. సో అదే మీ ఆన్సర్. డేటాబేస్ అనే దాంట్లో మీరు డేటాని స్టోర్ చేసుకోవాలి అనుకుంటే ఇట్ షుడ్ బి స్ట్రక్చర్డ్. సో దట్ ఈస్ ద రీజన్. అంటే మీరు అన్నారు కదా స్టేజింగ్లో పెట్టుకోవచ్చా అనేది. అంటే ఒకవేళ
హ్మ్.
స్టేజింగ్కి యూజ్ చేసే సిస్టమ్ అనేది, ఇఫ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ ఏబుల్ టు, ఇప్పుడు నేను మైఎస్క్యూఎల్ నా స్టేజింగ్ సిస్టమ్ లాగా యూజ్ చేస్తున్నాను అనుకోండి, మైఎస్క్యూఎల్ ఈజ్ ఏబుల్ టు
హ్మ్.
స్టోర్ ఓన్లీ ద స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటా. అట్లాంటి టైంలో నేను ఐ కాన్ స్టోర్ ద అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటా. ఒకవేళ మీ స్టేజింగ్ సిస్టమ్ అనేది ఇఫ్ ఇట్ ఈస్ ఏబుల్ టు స్టోర్ ద అన్‌స్ట్రక్చర్డ్ డేటా, దెన్ మీరు అన్నది కరెక్ట్ అయ్యింది.
ఓకే. అండర్‌స్టూడ్.
సో లెట్స్ కంటిన్యూ దిస్ డేటా లేక్ థింగ్. ఓకే, ఇట్ ఈస్ కాస్ట్ ఎఫెక్టివ్ బికాస్ ఇప్పుడు ఈ మూడింటిని ఇఫ్ యూ కంపేర్ ఆల్ దిస్ త్రీ, డేటా లేక్ ఇస్ కాస్ట్ ఎఫెక్టివ్ బికాస్ ఇట్ విల్ బీ యూజింగ్ the cheap hardware and cheap storage to hold the data. That is why you can keep thousands of years, I mean hundreds, tens of years of data in it. It is schema on read. So whenever you take this data lake, it is schema. So ఈ రెండు, if you see this database and data warehouse, these both are schema on write. Whenever you are writing the data into the database, you are validating the data. But when in this data lake, it is schema on read. So whenever you are inserting the data into the data lake, it doesn't do any validations. Whenever you are reading the data from the data lake, then you will be doing the then it will be doing the validations. Okay, did you get this difference? See, whenever you are writing the data, whenever you are inserting the data into the table, the validations are done here. But in case of data lake, whenever you are inserting the data into the data lake, no validations are done. Whenever you're reading the data from the data lake, then the validations are done. So if we see here, now we are storing the log file. So while you are storing the log file, you are not doing any validations. Whenever you are reading the data using this Hive tables, then you are doing the validations. So that is schema on read concept. So whenever you are reading the data, the structure is imposed. Here the structure is imposed before storing the data itself. Here the structure is imposed when you are reading the data. So whenever you want to read the data, here you are imposing the structure. Creating the table means what? You are imposing the structure on the log file. So that is schema on read. The main advantage of data lake is that it gives you the enough flexibility. That means you can keep all the raw data from your organization, and later whenever you want to use it in any form, you can feel free to use it. So what is this data lake giving flexibility is that it is allowing you to store any kind of data, and later when you want to use it, you will come back, you will select the data, and you will impose the structure on it, and then you use it. So ideally, what companies do is they'll keep all the data in the data lake, and there might be hundreds of teams working in the company. All the teams will have access to the data, and they can use the data in the way they want by creating the relevant structures. So what companies will do, they'll dump all the data, whichever they find useful. They'll dump all the data into the data lake. So which team wants to use that data, they'll acquire the data from the data lake and impose the structure on it, and then they do the transformations. And after doing the transformations, they'll load the data into the target tables. So here in ELT process, we worry about transformations only when we are using the data. సో ఈ ట్రాన్స్ఫర్మేషన్స్ అనే కాన్సెప్ట్ యూజ్ చేసే డేటాని యూజ్ చేసేటప్పుడు చేస్తున్నాము. బట్ ఇన్ ఈటీఎల్, before itself we are performing the transformations. Before using the data itself, we are performing the transformations. While coming to ELT, whenever you want to use the data, then only you are performing the transformations, you are cleansing the data, and you are using. So this is the most cost effective solution to hold the huge amount of data and later use as per our requirements. So now we have completed the difference between database, data warehouse, and data lake. Hope you guys understood. Hello, we are done for today, Andy. So if we want to revise, in today's class, we have learned what is data. As I've told you, it's just a collection of raw facts. Information, what is information? You can't directly use the data. So that is the reason you will process the data and convert it to a good format, which is called as information. For example, we have seen here RAM 20, and here's information. When you convert the data into the information, now you get it as RAM sage is 20. And what is big data? So big data is a technology which is used to deal with a huge amount of data. So the tools which you use to deal with this small amount of data are different, and the tools which you use to deal with the huge amount of data are different. And this is our example I've given you. And the different types of data you are going to extract for the business. See, these are the different kinds of data. Live data is the live data, which the best example is the cricket live updates. And the historical data, it is the past data which you collect to do analysis. And the analytical data, you'll collect this data to perform some analytics. And predictive data, you will collect the data to predict something. And data for changes, if you want to do certain changes in a product, then you will do a survey and get the information, and then decide on what to change in the product. And the sources of the data, these are transaction data, scientific data, sensor data, and these all we have covered. Transaction data, these are whenever you do a transaction get generated. And scientific data, it is mainly related to science, the data related to bacteria, DNA, species, etc. And the sensor data, it will be generated from all the sensors. And the social media data from our WhatsApp, Facebook, everything. These all. And the enterprise data, these are mostly you'll get all this data from the ERPs. And the public data is like census, Aadhaar card information, voter ID information. So these all are the public data. And ETL, we have seen extract, transform, load. You'll extract the data from the source system and put it in the staging area, and then do transformations and load it into the data warehouse, which is our target system. And then from here, reporting tools and other technical business users will connect to this data warehouse and get the insights from it. So in the ETL, the main point is all these three systems are different. Source system is different, staging system is different, data warehouse system, the target system is different. And in ETL, the mostly the target will be the data warehouse. And the types of data, unstructured data, structured data, semi-structured data. In the structured data, mostly it will be in tabular format. In semi-structured data, the examples are JSON and XML. And in unstructured data, these are text, audios, videos. These are the examples. And also, this is the main point: 99% of the tools do not support the processing of. 99% of ETL tools support the processing of structured data, and few of them support the semi-structured data. But the traditional ETL tools do not support the processing of unstructured data. So this is the reason this modern data warehouse have came into existence, wherein this modern data warehouses can store the structured, semi-structured, and unstructured data, whereas the traditional data warehouse do not store the unstructured and semi-structured data. Some of the examples of these are Snowflake, Synapse, and Redshift. And one of you have asked me like Synapse is a data lake or what? Synapse is data warehouse, and data lake associated with Azure is Azure Data Lake Storage. The data lake which is associated with Azure is Azure Data Lake Storage. And coming to this ELT concept, we in this the main important thing in ELT concept is we are worrying about doing transformations later after loading the data into the system. So here in ELT, what you'll do, you'll extract the data and put it into the data lake, and here in the staging layer, the raw data will be present. And whenever you want to use that data, then only you will perform the transformations on the raw data and move the data into the final layer. And this is the main discussion: the difference between data warehouse, data lake. The database we have. See, it is able to store the structured data. It is an OLTP, and it stores only the recent data. It is schema on write. That is, the validation is done before loading the data itself. I mean, before loading the data into the database. And it is also costly. It is inefficient to store the large amount of data in it. And coming to the data warehouse, it is used to store the historical data from the database. Definitely, it will be having the more data than a database. And sources of this data warehouse are databases, and it is also used to store the structured data. So whenever your target is a data warehouse, you will use the concept of ETL, and the examples are Teradata, Oracle, and it is less costly when compared to the database. And coming to the data lake, it is also similar to data warehouse, but it is also able to store the raw data. That is, you can store the structures and structured and unstructured data, and this follows the concept of ELT. So whenever your target is data lake, you will follow the concept of ELT, and you will use this ELT when you are going for big data. And this is schema on right. So you will impose the structure after loading the data into the target. Yeah, this is all for today.
Sisira, can you share the course content, course content, please?
Yeah.
And the services we are going to discuss, and what method we are following to while creating the services in Azure. I mean, are we following the traditional method from the tool itself we are creating the services, or are we following any templates to create the services? Which method you are going to show us?
Yeah,
Hello.
1 minute. I'm sharing. Yeah. 1 minute. I'll share the course content screen.